the teaching of the church and teaching of science at odds? It shouldn't be. Webster defines science as systematic knowledge of the physical or material world gained through observation and experimentation. In other words, science is finding answers by observation and experimentation. Why would I spend time talking about scientific things like where did we come from when I could be preaching about spiritual things? Well, I'm convinced that answering the question of where we came from by observation and experimentation, in other words, science, is a very, very spiritual matter. Just listen to what the Bible says in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, beginning in verse 13. And I set my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all that is done under heaven. This burdensome task God has given to the sons of man, by which they may be exercised. In other words, God put the desire to study science, the world around us, in mankind's heart. And here's the reason for that desire in verse 15. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be numbered. You see, God wanted us to realize that He created this whole world, and we can't change it. Take the weather, for instance. All we can do is live in it and complain about it. We can't change it. Even with all of the sophisticated equipment that we have, we can't even predict it very accurately. If a person is honest and objective with themselves, when you observe and experiment with nature, the only honest answer for creation is found in Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Why is creation so important? Because it sets the standard of right and wrong. If God created the world and everything in it, He alone has the right to set the standard, and from it everything will be measured. If God did not create the world and it created itself, then each one sets their own standard, and there's not a basic standard by which to measure right from wrong. Can you harmonize evolution and creationism? What if God created the world but used evolutionary method? Then the credibility of the Bible is in question, because the Bible declares that God created the world in 6 days. It's very important to understand that God is creator and His word is accurate. With that understanding, a person can have confidence, hope, and direction in life because they have a basis which is accurate. What the church is at odds with science is the explanation of creation and the presentation of evolution as a scientific fact, when it is not. In the beginning, did we evolve, or were we created? In the beginning, did God create the heavens and the earth? Or by some sheer chance, did particles create themselves and happen to fuse together to create this vast universe? The two major theories about creation are evolution and creationism. The Bible gives us the explanation of creationism in the book of Genesis, chapters 1 and 2. The Bible declares that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. It then proceeds to show that creation and how it was organized, set the beginning of keeping time, and shows God created all things within a 6-day period. It gives order and organization to God's plan to sustain mankind's need. Evolution was made popular by a man named Charles Darwin in a book that he wrote in 1859 called On the Origin of the Species. He theorizes that all creatures descend from a common single source. In other words, evolution explains that there was no organized creation. Rather, all things evolved by chance out of a single life form. It all happened by sheer chance. Well, is it God or chance? There are some problems with evolutionary theory. Evolution mixes two things together, one real and one imaginary. Variation, or microevolution, is the real part. The types of birds' beaks, the color of moths, leg size, etc. are all variation. Each type and length of beak a finch can have is already in the gene pool and adaptive mechanisms of finches. Creationists always agreed that there's a variation within species. What evolutionists do not want you to know is that there are strict limits to variation that are never, ever crossed. Something every breeder of animals or plants is aware of. Whenever variation is pushed to extremes by selective breeding to get the most milk from cows, sugar from beets, bristles on fruit flies, or any other characteristics, the line becomes sterile and dies out. As one characteristic increases, others diminish. But evolutionists want you to believe that changes continue, merging gradually into new kinds of creatures. This is where the imaginary part of the theory of evolution comes in. It says that new information is added to the gene pool by mutation and natural selection to create frogs from fish, reptiles from frogs, and mammals from reptiles, just to name a few. How do evolutionists explain the fact that there is no evidence of this big evolution ever happening? Well, evolutionists tell us that we cannot see evolution taking place because it happens too slowly. A human generation takes about 20 years from birth to parenthood. They say it took tens of thousands of generations to form man from a common ancestor with the ape, from populations of only hundreds or thousands. Well, that doesn't give a credible explanation. We do not have these problems with bacteria. A new generation of bacteria grows in as short as 12 minutes or up to 24 hours or more, depending on the type of bacteria and environment. But typically 20 minutes to a few hours. There are more bacteria in the world than there are grains of sand on all of the beaches of the world. And many grains of sand are covered with bacteria. They exist in just about any environment: hot, cold, dry, wet, high pressure, low pressure, small groups, large colonies, isolated, much food, little food, much oxygen, no oxygen, and toxic chemicals, etc. There is much variation in bacteria. There are many mutations. In fact, evolutionists say that smaller organisms have a faster mutation rate than larger ones. But they never, ever turn into anything new. They always remain bacteria. Fruit flies are much more complex than already complex single-cell bacteria. Scientists like to study them because a generation from egg to adult takes only 9 days. In the lab, fruit flies are studied under conceivable conditions. There's much variation in fruit flies. There are many mutations. But they never turn into anything new. They always remain fruit flies. Many years of study, countless generations of bacteria and fruit flies all over the world shows that evolution is not happening today. There is no proof that evolution ever occurred, just some speculation. Here's how the imaginary part is supposed to happen. On rare occasions, a mutation in DNA improves a creature's ability to survive, so it's more likely to reproduce. That's natural selection. That is evolution's only tool for making new creatures. It might even work if it took just one gene to make and control one part. But parts of living creatures are constructed of intricate components with connections that all need to be in place for the thing to work, controlled by many genes that have to act in proper sequence. Natural selection would not choose parts that did not have all their components existing in place, connected and regulated, because the parts would not work. So all the right mutations, and none of the destructive ones, must take place all at the same time by pure chance. That's physically impossible. To illustrate just how hopeless it is, imagine this. On the ground are all the materials needed to build a house: nails, boards, shingles, windows, etc. We tie a hammer to a wagging tail of a dog and let him wander about the work site for as long as he please, even 1,000,000 years. The swinging hammer on the dog is as likely to build a house as mutation natural selection is to make a single new working part in an animal, let alone a brand new creature. Believing in beneficial mutations is like believing a short circuit in the motherboard of your computer could improve its performance. To make any lasting change, a beneficial mutation would have to spread through a population and stay or become fixed. Darwin's theory as to how living form came into being did not explain how the earth and all elements got here. So evolutionary scientists came up with a theory called the Big Bang Theory to try and explain where the world came from. The Big Bang Theory simply says about 15 billion years ago or so, a tremendous explosion started the expansion of the universe. This expansion is known as the Big Bang. At the point of this event, all of the matter and energy of space was contained at one small point. In other words, this theory says that in the beginning there was absolutely nothing, and out of nothing came particles, and then many particles. Gases appeared out of nothing somewhere along the way. Then the gases exploded, propelling at such a great velocity that they fused together to form one stronger particle. Watch this popular TV commercial and ask yourself the question, do you believe that this could happen?
Doesn't have to slow you down. Introducing Better Car Replacement.
That would be impossible, wouldn't it? It'd be great if it were possible, but it just is not a reasonable deduction. Why? Just think how many parts would have to fall in just the right spot at just the right time and have enough velocity and speed to cause them to fuse together at just the right angle. It's estimated that the average automobile may have as many as 200,000 individual parts. The mathematical probability of each one falling into the right place at the correct angles and being fused to form a correct fit is absolutely impossible. Yet the likelihood of this car reassembling itself is far, far greater than the world coming together by chance, because there are billions and billions and billions and billions and billions more components involved, plus the fact that each one would have to create itself. It's really kind of silly when you think about it. The Big Bang concept alleges that some 20 billion years ago, give or take 10 billion or so, all of the matter in the known universe was tightly packed into a microscopic cosmic egg. One writer expresses it this way: astonishingly, scientists now calculate that everything in this vast universe grew out of a region many billions of times smaller than a single proton, one of the atom's basic particles. Well, this is truly an incredible statement. In one of his books, Dr. Robert Jastrow asserts that in the beginning, All matter in the universe was compressed into an infinitely dense and hot mass that exploded. Over many eons, supposedly, the primordial cloud of the universe expands and cools, stars are born and die, the sun and earth are formed, and life arises on earth. Dr. Jastrow is describing, of course, what is commonly known as the Big Bang Theory. Where the cosmic egg came from, no one seems to know. Certainly no cosmic chickens have been located. Some allege that the egg always existed. They speculate that it's possibly resulted from some earlier universe that collapsed upon itself. This assumes that matter is eternal. But this idea is refuted by our knowledge of physics, especially the second law of thermodynamics. Jastrow concedes that modern science denies an eternal existence into the universe, either in the past or in the future. Others, like Professor Victor Stinger of the University of Hawaii, muse that perhaps the universe came from nothing. The egg laid itself. The universe is probably the result of a random quantum fluctuation in a spaceless, timeless void. The earth and humanity are not conscious creations, but an accident. Stephen Hawking, who is an English physicist and cosmologist, whose scientific books and public appearances have made him an academic celebrity. He is considered by many to be the smartest man in the world. Recently says that he made a great discovery to account where the egg came from. He has a relatively new theory called quantum gravity. Simply, this theory enforces his theory that thousands and thousands of universes were begun all over the vastness of space. You can't predict the beginning of a new universe because the beginning was through many forms, not just one. He says that the force of gravity caused the many different forms of beginning, and that it's not necessary to believe that God or any intelligent designer had any part of creation. He doesn't know where gravity came from, but says that it always was, and he hasn't seen any evidence of this theory, but believes it explains how a beginning could have occurred without an intelligent creator. Dr. Hawkins is a very intelligent man without question. He's done some pretty remarkable things in his life. He has overcome a debilitating disease with tremendous courage, which confined him to a wheelchair and makes him speak with a computer-generated voice. While I applaud his great courage and fortitude, I believe that he has overlooked proof, reasoning, and common sense. This does not come close to proving that creation did not need a designer to create the vast universe, organize it, and maintain it. The Discovery Channel did a very impressive documentary about Dr. Hawkins and about his theory, and about how evolution in the Big Bang Theory is going. We just can't see it because it's out beyond our universe in a different galaxy, far beyond the scope of the human microscope. New universes or new planets are being created, but we just can't see it, in other words. Sounds good, but there is absolutely no evidence to support this theory. Wow, this world is an awesome thing to behold. Human body is unbelievable in its complexity. The psalmist declares, I will praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Check the science and tell me, where did we come from? Were we created or did we evolve? Remember, science is the study from observation and experimentation. Observation and experimentation of evolution. There is nothing to observe. There's not been any evolution in recorded history. The theory of Dr. Hawkins that it's still going on, we just can't predict it because it's happening in many different forms thanks to gravity, and we can't see it because it's happening so far beyond our ability to record it, is just a theory with no evidence. Experimentation of evolution is that it goes against all the laws of nature. Anything left to itself will fall to destruction, not improve, organize, and reproduce itself. Mathematically, this universe and all of its components, by chance being exploded and fused together to form a magnificent world such as we have, is absolutely impossible. To think that man evolved from pond scum to form a thinking, rational, self-sufficient creature as he is not rational, logical, or possible. Where did the particles come from? Where did the pond scum come from, the living cell? How did the living cell replicate itself? Where did the gravity come from? Observation and experimentation of creation. We observe the organization of nature, the consistent reproduction within species as God set in place. We observe the unexplainable workings of the human body, except that they had a divine architect and builder. And the wonder of the vastness, yet the order of the universe. All the planets stay in the orbit just like God placed them. We see great evidence that this old world is relatively young, about 6,000 years old, rather than billions and billions of years old. And that a great catastrophe, such as a great flood, marked the surface of the earth. Observation and experimentation complete. True science would have to conclude that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Well, why don't scientists see this? Many do. In a recent article, Dr. Russell Humphreys, physicist at Sandia National Laboratories in New Mexico, estimates that there are around 10,000 practicing professional scientists in the USA alone who openly believe in the six-day creation. One of the self-serving arguments of the modern evolutionist is their rather arrogant claim that creationist scientists are not real scientists. No matter that a large number of creationists have earned authentic PhDs, degrees in science, hold responsible scientific positions, and have published numerous scientific articles and books. If they are creationists, they're not true scientists, they think. Well, you decide. If you recognize the evidence and realize that God created the world, then you must accept that He has the right to set the standards for what's right and what's wrong, what sin is. The Bible tells us that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. It tells us that the wages of sin is spiritual death. It further tells us that God so loved the world that He gave His only Son so that whoever believes in Him will not perish, but will live forever. The decision is yours.